we have a real problem now in many cities, including London mainly, of young men in their teens, early 20s, going out, joining gangs, stabbing each other to death, carrying knives, wanting to be violent. Now, you were in their shoes when you were a young man. You were running with bad crowds, you were getting into fights all the time and so on. You've evolved massively as a human being through your adult years. What advice would you give to these young kids who are just running off the rails, going the way that we discussed in the podcast?
Really, in this aspect, in this pretty much element, you have to teach these kids not to be so xenophobic, not to be so afraid of people who are different than they are, to go over there and shake their hand and talk to them and not be such afraid of them and stop to be intimidated of people. And that's the only reason that we're hostile towards one another, because we're unaware of one another, we're unsure of one another, we're not affiliated with one another, we're so disenfranchised with one another. We need to be more associated with one another instead of pulling away from one another.
These kids, you know, they seem to have been almost abandoned, I guess, in their heads, by society. A lot of them have been thrown out of school. A lot of them maybe just have one parent and a parent's disappeared. You know, you had, I know, you know, not an easy upbringing by any means, but you somehow came through all that.
But I can't use that for an excuse, though. Mm. You know, there's no way I can use that for an excuse. You know, I came up in a bad environment. I didn't grow up with a father. I grew up with a mother that was she was a sex worker. You know, we were always humiliated. We never had any pride in our family. No one knew who we were, and that's just made us one really hot nest egg for just crime and just being xenophobic towards everybody and don't want to be around anybody that's different than you are and stuff. And that's what we have to take. We have to become. We just have to get away from this dark ages of feeling that we're different and we're against them and they're against us, and it's just ridiculous. And we all should be united.
People that join the gangs, they do so sometimes because they've got nowhere else where they feel inclusive. But, of course, they then come up against other gangs, and that's why a lot of the crime in London in particular at the moment is young gang members marching around with knives, and they're fighting each other and they're killing each other in record numbers. You know, there's an issue there about feeling empowered by a gang, isn't there? How do you tackle that? How do you persuade them of another life that doesn't involve walking around armed and wanting to kill rival gang members?
Well, you need people that want to walk around and want to save rival gang members. You know, we need people that show love and show considerate and show compassion towards one another instead of showing such destructiveness towards one another.
Mike, some people accuse boxing of promoting violence, legitimising violence, but can trying to divert some of these youngsters into an activity like boxing help them channel whatever aggression that they're feeling?
Well, listen, everyone's not going to be a world champion boxer. That's just not going to happen. So it's not necessarily going to have to use boxing to make people friends and associate with one another. They should use love and, love and compassion. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sporting event to prove who's better than one another, to prove that we're companions. It could be just two people associating with one another from a humanity perspective.
How did you find peace, Mike? I've known you a long time. First knew you, I first bumped into you at a MC Hammer concert in New York. At the height of your powers, you were then world heavyweight champion, just become the champ. You were the baddest man on the planet, and you sort of rippled with power and intimidation and so on then. And then I've interviewed you many times over the years, and I've got to say, when I saw you in LA last week, I don't think I've ever seen you so calm and apparently at peace with yourself.
Hey, listen, my whole life as a kid, from like 12 years old, I was just taught to beat people, break them down, humiliate them, have them, break their will, you know what I mean? Show I'm more superior than they are, show the world I'm better than everybody. But in all actuality, I was just a scared little insecure kid. Had no idea what I was doing, but it felt good, and everyone told me I was great doing it. And so that led me on to become this guy and this tyrant and this guy that had no self-respect and said the really bizarre, disrespectful things to other opponents and stuff like that. And as I look at it and everything, in all aspects, I did it all wrong.
Do you have regrets, Mike? Or, I mean, I saw your one-man show in Vegas a couple of years ago. It was a most extraordinarily powerful night. It wasn't really about boxing. It was about you and your life. But do you have regrets, or do you think that all this stuff was something you just had to go through because of circumstance and that you've managed somehow to come out of it the other end?
No way. My whole life was a regret. You know, my whole life, my action, my conduct, a lot of stuff I did in my life, especially as a fighter, a lot of it has a lot of regret.
Piers claims that he once sparred with you, but you were so frightened of him landing a punch that you actually ran away.
At this stage in my life, I'm pretty afraid, yeah.
That's the only headline I wanted from this.
To be fair, he's got a bit of heft on him.
Tyson, I'm scared of the Morganator. That's all I wanted to hear. You were very sad that because of a change in the immigration laws in this country in 2013, that because you've served a prison sentence of more than 4 years for a rape conviction in the early 90s, you're not allowed back into Great Britain at the moment. And I know that you have a great affinity with this country. What do you feel about the fact you can't travel here anymore?
Hey, listen, I believe your guys have your laws, your guys have your criminals, and as we were talking earlier about your guys' violence problem with young kids, but listen, what does that have to do with me? Your guys have a tons of criminals over there that can come over here. I don't understand. I've always been able to go over Great Britain and go and hang out in London and all over Europe, but I don't know. I guess it is what it is. We have to change those laws, huh?
Is it a sad thing for you that you can't come back to Britain? Because I know that you enjoyed your time here.
Oh, man, sad is an understatement, man. I miss being over there. That place was the start of my whole life and career when I first started doing this boxing stuff. I never had a great fanfare than I had in England. It's really massive, really. It's something that's really overwhelming.
The shame, I think, of it is that actually your voice right now in Britain, talking to these young kids, getting involved in all this gang crime and knife crime and so on, I actually think it could be a powerful voice for them. You're somebody who's been in their shoes, who's run in those shoes, who's fought in those shoes.
Well, they have to believe this, that there's hope in life. You know, they don't believe there's any hope in life. There's no hope for a better life. If they had believed that there's hope for a better life, they wouldn't conduct themselves that way. That's the only reason that I conducted myself. I didn't believe I had hope for a better life. And then I started boxing and I saw hope. But other than that, I thought about killing people and people's lives didn't mean anything and all that stuff too. I was the same way, these kids. I used to be in gangs. I used to have guns. I used to shoot at people. I used to be shot at and all that stuff. And I don't want to live my life that way anymore.
There's a really interesting sort of paradox, isn't there, in the fact that California has legalized cannabis for just over a year for those over 21 years of age. And lots of this gang violence, particularly here, is driven by drug dealing. But people are also very concerned about the effect that cannabis, marijuana might have on your health, on your mental health. Is the legalization of the drug over there something that you think overall is to the good? I mean, you are setting up a business, a ranch, in order to make money out of it. Or can you also acknowledge that it does have its negative effects?
I don't believe it has any negative effects. Maybe you might go to sleep while you have a business meeting or something, but other than going to sleep, I don't see a negative effect. You know, no one's ever known to smoke a joint of cannabis and killed the whole house. Just say you put 5 people in a room that don't like each other. They smoke cannabis. They start taking selfies with one another. You put some alcohol in a room and get 5 people that don't like each other. They're gonna kill each other.
Well, you'd certainly hope not. I get the point, though, that alcohol
that's going to happen.
Alcohol is a legalized drug as well. What do you think the overall... OK, so you dispute the medical side effects of cannabis, and other people would take issue with that. But what do you think overall has been the benefit of the legalization of it in California?
Listen, I think it's been a miracle drug since its existence in 1876, since when it first came here, and I think it's a miracle drug to this day.
People, I think, look at it and say, well, it's better to be regulated and to make it very safe and to be very careful about how it gets distributed and so on
And you know what
in a
you're
legal way.
getting, because,
And
of course,
you know what you're getting. I think a lot of the
with
problem
illegal drugs is you don't know.
Yeah, and cannabis in this country, now a lot of it on the street is very strong, much stronger, certainly, than the stuff you can get legally in California. It'll be very interesting. It's spreading around America very quickly, whether it comes to this country or not.